Seattle, headed to the Fortune Poker Room. What's up, guys? I am in Washington at Renton at the Fortune Poker Room. I'm staying at the Clarion Hotel, which is right next door. Playing some 1-3 or 3-5, whatever's available first. All right, wish me luck. Welcome to Renton, Washington, the city near Seattle that no one's ever heard of. I'm in Seattle for a wedding, so I might as well play a little poker while I'm here. I put my name on the 1-3 and 3-5 boards and get called for the 1-3 game first. We buy in for $300, and the first significant hand we play is 2-3 of spades on the small blind. There are 5 limpers, I limp, and the big blind checks. From what I've seen in the first 10 minutes of playing, people seem super timid and passive. The flop comes out 2-3-10 with 2 hearts and a spade. Because this table is so gun-shy, I make it $15 right out of the gate. Only the under the gun +1 player calls, and the turn comes the 6 of hearts. The heart draw makes a flush, and the straight draw makes a straight. So, safe to say it's a bad card for us, and I check. The +1 player bets $20, and for such a cheap price, I make the call. The river is the 5 of hearts, and now my hand feels about as strong as a wet noodle. I check, the +1 player bets $40, and I fold. Next up, I get dealt ace-queen of clubs on the button. The cutoff limps, and I raise it up to $15. The small blind calls, and the big blind 3-bets to $65. Even though I haven't seen much aggression from the table, I'm in position toward the top of my range, so I make the call, and the small blind calls as well. The flop comes out king 9-7 with 2 spades and a club. The small blind donks out for $50, the big blind folds, and the action's on me. This is such a small bet, only a little more than a quarter of the pot, so I make the call. I'm in position, and I have a backdoor flush draw and straight draw. The turn comes out the 8 of diamonds, not helping my hand at all, and the small blind goes all in for $140 effective. I have a whopping nothing, and I fold. I add on $100 and take a few hands down pre-flop, then I pick up ace-10 off on the big blind. The low jack limps, the small blind limps, and I'm not about to let the rake take most of the money. I bump it up to $15 and the low jack folds. The small blind then goes all in for $103 and says, "Really not that good. You know, sitting at a poker table, I'm usually surrounded by a bunch of liars, but this time I felt I was staring into the eyes of an honest man. I call, and the board runs out 8-4-4-6-2. I flip over my cards early to be nice, and he mucks. Like I said earlier, people on this table were pretty timid and not very willing to give action. There weren't a lot of interesting hands, as most times I won either taking down limp pots with a raised pre-flop, or taking down small pots with a continuation bet on the flop or turn. After about 3 hours, I got called for the 3-5 game, so I stood up, making $115 profit. I sit down with $500, and the first hand I play, I have queen-king off in the hijack. There's a straddle, so I open to $35. The straddle calls, and the flop comes out ace-8-4. The straddle checks, and I c-bet $30 as I will have an ace much more frequently in my range. He calls, and the turn is a 6. He checks, and I have nada. I check back, hoping to hit a queen or a king on the river. Nope, it comes a 3. The straddle leads out for $75, and I fold. Unfortunately, I'm pretty card dead, and every 30 minutes we're playing a $25 bond pot, where everyone puts in $25 blind, and we see a flop. None of those hit me, so it really feels like I'm just slowly bleeding out in the corner at this point. I pick up 7-8 of hearts under the gun. There's a straddle, so I make it $35, and only the straddle calls. The flop comes out ace-queen-2 all spades, the straddle checks, and even though I have no draws and 8 high, I'm more likely to hit this board because I was the one who raised pre-flop. I make a bet of $30, and Batman decides he doesn't want to protect our villain's cards anymore. He folds, and I finally take down a pot. Maybe we can get some momentum going now. A round later, I pick up pocket 10s under the gun. I open to $15, the under the gun +1, button, and big blind call. The flop comes out 9-7-3, all clubs, and the big blind checks. I have an overpair with my 10s, and since the board is so connected, I decide to go for a nearly pot-sized bet of $55. Only the +1 player calls, and we're seeing a turn which comes an offsuit 6. I think there's a good chance this player would have raised me if he had a set or a small flush. So I'm thinking in my head he likely has like the ace or the king of clubs. I bet again, this time for $115, and my opponent goes all in and has me covered. I think for a while if he could be bluffing with just a club draw, but it wouldn't make that much sense because I only have about $175 left in my stack. I don't think I would fold enough for that bluff to be worth it. I sigh and fold, and he turns over 8-10 of spades for a turned straight. I was ahead on the flop, but pretty much dead on the turn. A little after that, I called it a night, playing a few boring hours of 1-3 and a few boring hours of 3-5. Luckily, stay tuned because the next morning I played one more 1-3 session that had more interesting hands. So smash that like button and here we go. New day, we're playing 1-3 and immediately I can tell there's more action than yesterday. In the first hand, there's a straddle to $15. At this casino, you apparently have the option to straddle to any amount you want. I pick up pocket nines in the small blind and I raise to $45. The straddle calls, his name is Logan, and he actually streams poker and Fortnite on his Twitch, so check him out if you're interested. The flop comes out 2-3-6 with 2 spades, and I bet $45 with my overpair. He raises to $145, and even though I just sat down, I already saw him making some crazy moves, plus he's straddling to $15. I decide to put him to the test and go all in for $270 total. He thinks for a bit and then folds. The next hand is definitely an interesting one. I'm under the gun and I opened at $12 with ace-7 of spades. It folds around to the big blind, who shows me his cards, ace-8 of hearts, not realizing at the time that I was the one who raised, and he still makes the call. The flop comes out king-jack-8 with 1 heart. Our opponent has bottom pair and a backdoor flush draw, and he checks to me. I know there's no way I can win this hand unless I make him fold, so I bet $10 knowing he'll likely call for now. He does call, and the turn comes the 6 of hearts. He checks, and now he has a heart draw. I bet $30 knowing he'll call again, but my plan is to make a large bet on the river when he misses the heart, ace, or 8. He calls, and of course the river comes the 4 of hearts. Our plan completely backfires, and our opponent bets $60. I fold because I already know he has the nut flush. I was like, okay, he got the flush on the river, and I already know what you have. Moving on, I pick up queen-10 of spades under the gun +1. The under the gun limps, and I open to $15. Then the hijack 3 bets to $45, the big blind cold calls, and the under the gun calls as well. It's only $30 more for me to see a flop and possibly win a huge pot, so I call and the flop comes out jack 9-7. I flop the best straight draw and the big blind checks. I check to the pre-flop 3-better, but it ends up checking around and the turn comes another 7. The big blind leads out for $100, the under the gun folds, and it's on me. It's a hefty price for me to try to hit my straight draw, and it's possible someone could already have a full house, so I just fold. I'm so glad I folded, as the hijack goes all in for $300. I stopped recording so I don't have the footage, but the big blind calls and the river comes out a brick. The hijack flips over ace-king as a total bluff, and the big blind wins the pot with pocket queens. During this session, I kept getting 3-bet whenever I opened marginal hands, and it was funny because every time I folded, my opponent would show a monster hand like aces or kings. I was joking about this with my neighbor as my stack was slowly dwindling down, and then I picked up pocket nines under the gun. There was a straddle to $20, so I opened to $60, 3 times the straddle. The hijack then went all in and the action folded back to me. Guys, this is it. I opened the closet door and the monsters just come leaping out at me. Like what? How much is that?
126.
Yeah, I mean, I call. I don't. I hate this, but 136. You said 126. All right. The monsters are coming for me, and it's bad. It looks terrible for me.
You're already manifesting it. Pretty.
Yeesh. The monsters.
Show for the camera.
Alright, there you go.
Yikes.
Even though I'm down a little bit of money, it's a fun table, there's action, we're laughing, and I pick up Queen 9 of clubs on the button. The Under the Gun and Hijack limp, so I raise it up to $18, and the big blind, Under the Gun, and Hijack call. Going four ways to the flop, it comes out King 10-2 with 2 hearts, and the action checks around to me. In a four-way pot, I don't see the need to bluff here, plus I have a gut shot straight draw, so I'd rather just check and take a free card. The turn comes a 4, and the action checks to me again. I consider betting this time because everyone looks quite weak now, but I just check and the river comes a 6. For the third time, it checks to me, and now I'm almost positive no one is interested in their hand. I bet $50 hoping everyone will fold. Everyone does fold, and I take down the pot. In this next one, the hijack limps, the cutoff raises to $10, and I'm feeling a little case of the deja vus because I'm back on the button with Queen 9 of clubs again. I call, the big blind and hijack both call as well, and we're headed four ways to the flop. The flop comes out Queen 9-5 all hearts, and the action checks to me. I have top 2 pairs, so I bet $25, expecting anyone with a decent heart to continue, and only the hijack calls. The turn comes out the 8 of hearts, putting a 4th heart on the board. The hijack checks, and I think it's very likely he has a heart at this point. I check back, and the river is a 6. He bets $30, and I just don't think he's bluffing here, so I fold. He flips over Jack King of hearts, and we get away losing minimally. Thank goodness the turn came a 4th heart, otherwise I most likely would have lost more money. An orbit later, the Under the Gun +1 player limps, the cutoff limps, and I look down at Ace-6 of diamonds on the button. Rarely do I limp, but the rake is lower here than in California, so I limp with the best position. The big blind then raises it up to $18, the +1 calls, and I call. The flop comes out King 3-5 rainbow, and the big blind checks. When the preflop raiser checks this flop multi-way, I don't expect him to have much of anything. Then the +1 player puts out a pretty weak bet of $13. Because he just limp called preflop, I don't think he'll have any of the strongest kings most of the time, so I decide to put him to the test. I have backdoor straight draws and a backdoor flush draw, so I throw in a bluff raise to $45. The big blind folds, the +1 player calls, and the turn comes the 4 of diamonds. The +1 checks, and now I have an open-ended straight draw and the nut flush draw. I think this is as good a card as any to put maximum pressure on, and I go all in for $141. He folds, and we get the bluff through to take down the pot. Last hand of the vlog, I get dealt Jack King of diamonds in the big blind, the hijack, cutoff, and small blind limp, and I go to raise it up to $20, but my hand slips. Oh, sorry.
15.
Oh no. My hand's broken. It's a trick, guys. It's a trap. Well, the hijack and cutoff call, and the flop comes out 8-9-10 rainbow. With my open-ended straight draw and 2 overs, I bet $30, the hijack folds, and the cutoff calls. The turn comes the queen of clubs, giving us the nut straight. I think about whether I should bet or check this card. If I bet, I could easily scare him away if he just has a pair. This board now looks pretty scary as the queen is an overcard to the flop and any jack now has a straight. If I check, I'm fairly certain any jack will bet and will call me if I raise. Also, if he only has a pair, he could decide to turn his hand into a bluff because he thinks I'm weak, or at the very least be more likely to call a bet on the river. I check and he bets $60. I raise it up to $160 and he calls. The river is a 9 pairing the board. I no longer have the nuts, but this is no time to be scared, and I go all in for about $110. He calls, I show my cards, and he shows Jack 10 for a worse straight. I take down a nice pot to end the session. Unfortunately, I accidentally deleted my outro footage, but we were in this session for $400 and cashed out for $652. Overall, in 9 hours and 13 minutes of playing poker at the Fortune Poker Room, we made a whopping $58 profit. I think it's safe to say I truly conquered the poker scene in Washington. But before I go, I'd like to mention 2 places to eat that I ate at that I'd recommend if you ever stop by Seattle. The first is the Taylor Shellfish Oyster Bar near Pike Place. Hands down, best oysters I've ever had. The second is Dim Sum King in Chinatown. It may look janky, but the dim sum is cheap and tasty, and if you go there, you have to check out their egg tarts. I promise you, you won't regret it. Well, that's it for me. If you're still here, thanks for watching to the end. Smash that like button, and I'll see you in the next one.